Hello, Harold Smith here, Legacy Mutual Mortgage. Our topic is buying a home and keeping your current home as a rental property. This comes up from time to time, and there are some really great advantages of this. Admittedly, it's not for everyone, but there's a lot of little tricks of it that a lot of people are not aware of that really can be very beneficial. And I'm going to screen share a little bit as we talk through this. There is a chat as well. So if you have questions or something that comes to mind, put it there in the chat and I will definitely try to address it as we go forward. But let's just jump straight into it. And I'm going to screen share right now. Perfect. Here we go. So just keep it real simple here. Just a basic little PowerPoint. Buying a home, keeping your current home as a rental. So a couple of little topics to be aware of. So some pros. Well, obviously rental income. It's kind of obvious. You wouldn't probably be doing it if you didn't think it could generate income for you. But let me address this. Sometimes people hear that and they go, well, of course, I'm going to do it. I'm only going to do it if I make rental income, if it's positive income. And you may feel that way. However, I have had clients who will buy a rental property or do this, and their goal is not necessarily rental income per month. Now, not that they're really looking to lose a lot of money, but sometimes people own a rental property, an investment property, purely on the premise that they know that, okay, they've got a tenant paying down on the payment, helping make the mortgage payment, and their mere owning the property is going to build equity. So they're buying it. Yes, they may get to the point where there's positive rental income, but they know that the home value is generally rising, the loan balance is generally falling, and they're doing it for that equity position that's going to come about. Because the nice thing about a home is you get that equity appreciation kind of just by owning it. It's irrelevant of the mortgage balance or anything. So I've had plenty of people who have owned a rental property and it creates a little bit of a loss per month, maybe $100, $200, $300 a month in loss. Not that they love that, but they know, wow, but hey, it's appreciating at 4 or 5 or 6% a year. And it's a $400,000 house. And they're like, hey, even at a 4% appreciation rate, they made on a $400,000 house, they made basically $16,000. That ain't too bad. So they're willing to take that little bit of a loss for that gain, which of course they would realize when they sell it. So don't just judge it just because it doesn't have a positive rental income to be a bad investment. Okay, something to think about. Ability to buy a rental property with less down and better rates. This is a really key benefit of taking your current home and turning it into a rental property as you maybe buy another. There are basically 3 property types when somebody buys a home: primary residence, investment property, that's like a rental property, and second home. Now, we tend to think of a second home as like a lake house, a house in the mountains, something like that. It doesn't have to be. By the way, you can buy a second home that maybe is at the lake or is in the mountains or in North Carolina or whatever pretty setting you can think of. And you could live there some of the year, and you can also Airbnb it some of the time. Okay. So you can have a little bit of the both worlds in that case. I've had several clients do that very thing. Okay. But of those 3 property types, primary residence always gets the best rates and the best down payment terms. Okay. Investment property and second homes do have a little bit higher rates. It's irrelevant of how good of a quality buyer that they are. Impeccable credit, great debt ratios, really solid assets. Those are all great, wonderful things. And yes, that's going to help them get good rates. But merely the fact that it is an investment property or a second home is going to take the rates up a little bit. To give perspective here, let's say that I have a client that wants to buy a rental property and they're never going to live in it. They are purely going to buy it for investment property purposes. Basically, for all practical purposes, they need to plan to do at least 20% down. More is better, but at least 20% down. Well, for a primary home, if they're a first-time home buyer, now they might be able to do a VA loan. There's some other things there, but generally most buyers could probably do a first-time home with 3% down. If it's not their first home, they could do it for as little as 5% down, assuming they qualify in other ways. So way lower down payment requirements. So in other words, if you went into this with the premise of, I'm going to buy this home, live here a couple of years, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, you'll get best rates, you'll get best down payment terms. Then when they turn that into a rental property in a year or more, they don't have to refinance the loan. They don't have to do anything with the loan. Just continue to make the payment. Okay, so that's the key part to this. By the way, when someone buys a primary home, in the deed of trust, it will say, there's a paragraph that says basically that they're buying it as primary residence and their intention is to live in the home 12 months or more. 12 months or more. So as long as they live in the home for a year or more, all is fine. Okay. By the way, I have had this happen. It's rare, but let's say you bought a home and you got relocated to another city in 5 or 6 months. Sorry, stop that. In 5 or 6 months, you got relocated. Hey, that's okay. The key word there is intention. Okay. Now, if you knowingly bought a house and knew you were going to get relocated, that's a different story. That could be considered loan fraud. Don't want to do that. Okay. Not a good thing. So get better rates, interest rates, and lower down payment requirements when you buy it as a primary home that you then convert to a rental. It's an easy way to test the waters on investment properties and managing investment properties. You know, it's just real easy because it's a home you already own. You've lived there a while. You know a lot about the home. Then if you decide to buy your next house, it's a simple way to kind of test the waters. And here's the deal. Let's say you try it for a year or two. Maybe it's great. You're like, wow, this is really great. I've got great tenants. The home value is rising. The loan balance is falling. I love this. I want to continue to do this. That's great. Awesome. But let's say you do it for a while and you go, man, I don't really like this. It's just not for me. I don't really like managing it. I don't like dealing with the tenants. It's just not my thing. That's okay. Sell it. Sell it. It's a real easy way to test the waters. Okay. When you take your current home and turn it into a rental, something to think about. This is a great strategy. You may have heard this before, but if you have a desire to kind of build your real estate empire, and not everybody does, but to have some rental properties, you buy one, live in it for a couple of years, then turn it into a rental property, buy number 2, live in it for a couple of years, then turn it into a rental property, then buy property number 3. You see where that's going. It's quite possible in 6, 7, 10 years, you could probably have 5 properties. It's a big deal. Now, let me mention something to think about here. Sometimes people go, oh, well, I really want to do more down because if I do more down payment, I'll have a lower payment. Or if I do more down, I won't have mortgage insurance. Or if I do more down, my mortgage insurance would be less expensive. All those are true. However, let's just say that you bought a home, you did 25, 30% down, and you really didn't have a whole lot of other cash reserves left over. Well, that's okay. But if you then decided you were going to take your current home and turn it into a rental property, you may wish you had not done so much down payment when you bought the house in the first place. What if instead you had only done 5 or 10% down, leaving that money over in your checking or savings account, so that then that money would be available to you should you need it for another house down the road. Okay, so this is where we kind of have to do our best to think ahead. If you know that it's a goal that you have to gradually build your real estate empire, you may intentionally want to not do as much down payment, leaving those monies available, because keep in mind, that's one of the disadvantages you don't get when you take your current home and turn it into a rental property. Well, you're not selling it. You don't get that equity check, okay, because you're not selling it, right? Something to think about, just something you definitely need to play with, all right? Let me screen share here again. So that's a way to kind of gradually build that up a little bit. So cons, like I said, you don't have that equity to go towards the next home. So just be careful what your plans are for down payment. Again, if you know, I don't have any desire to ever own rental property, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Then you may just want to go ahead and do a little more down. Okay. But really something to consider and think about. All right. Now, let's go over here and let's look a little bit at this next slide. How? Some people wonder, well, how does this work? And there's a couple of different ways that this works. So now let me say that some buyers, when they buy the next house, they qualify just fine. Their debt ratios are great to carry both homes. No big deal. Debt ratio, as a reminder, is the home payment, okay, the mortgage itself, plus the property taxes, plus the home insurance, plus any HOA dues, if there are any, plus any other monthly debts on your credit report. So if there's a car payment, a student loan payment, a credit card balance, you have a boat loan, motorcycle, anything where you've borrowed money and you're repaying it and it shows up on your credit report. Those are the kind of things that show up on your debt ratio. So if the person or the couple has plenty of income to support both homes, that's fine. They can totally do it. I looked at a client the other day who their income is great. They have been kind of conservative, we might say, with homes that they've bought. They actually are going to be able to carry 3 homes and none of them are rented. Okay. So it's a blessed position that they're in. Not everybody can do that, right? Everybody's in a different boat. That's okay. So they may be able to qualify for both homes just on their income. Now, I'll admit, not everybody qualifies that way. So we may need to count some rental income of the home that you're going to be leaving. Now, I say leaving, you're not selling it, you're just moving out of it and going over to home number 2. Well, how do we do that? Let me say, this is where this could get a little off the rails. So I'm not going to give you every little underwriting guideline, but I'll give you the basics. Okay, that's what you need for right now, because every situation can vary a little bit. But generally, if we can show a lease agreement on your current home, must be a 1-year lease, okay, or more, we can then take of that, let's just keep it simple. Say you were going to lease your current home for $2,000 a month, okay? Generally, the underwriting guidelines will allow us to take 75% of that lease agreement as rental income. 75% of what's on the lease. Now, let me say there are some validations that they do. They may, there's a document, they may require an appraiser to say, is that a valid rent for that area? Okay. And there's some other rules about, well, if you have a copy, if you not only have a signed lease, but you also have receipt of the security deposit and the first month's rent. Generally, by the way, that's what most landlords do, is require the first month's rent and the security deposit. I'll talk more about that in just a minute, but we get to count 75% of that as offsetting income. So that may be enough income to offset the payment and improve their debt ratio. I've had that happen quite a bit. Now, that 75% may not be enough to cover what the actual mortgage payment is, but that may be okay. Maybe just on paper, it would show a loss of $100. Well, if their debt ratio could absorb that extra 100, no big deal. So then that buyer could qualify to buy their next home while keeping their current as a rental property. Okay, a lot of different details here we have to walk through. Let me say, address one common theme here that I can tell when I talk with clients kind of gets them nervous about, well, how do I show a lease on my current house when I still need to live here? And how does all that work? Like, there's just some logistical things there, and there are, I'll admit. A lot of times, let me say, how you do this is up to you. But for this first of all, we would need to look at the numbers of your specific situation. Okay. I would highly recommend we do that before you get any tenant, before you even decide for sure that's what you're going to do. Let's look at the numbers. Okay. So that's something we would do individually, and we would talk it through. But let's say it all seemed to make sense. Well, then maybe this first tenant that you get, you may want to try to find a tenant that is a little more flexible. Okay. Who, yeah, you may not try to get the top tier rent. I'm not saying give it away, but maybe you might find a tenant that you're like, I kind of know them a little bit. Maybe I know them through this work circle or through this church circle or through whatever those different interactions are. I had a client that one time rented their primary home. They did this very thing. They bought another home, took their current as a rental property, and the wife was a teacher, and still is, and she knew of some other teacher friends that wanted to live together and rent the house. So they were more flexible on what they did with them. That was a great solution. So it kind of gave a little bit of flexibility, obviously within reason. Have had people that found some friends through church or different other circles that they have available to them. So you may need to be a little, every situation is different. But sometimes finding a home that can be rented, sometimes it's actually very competitive. So if you needed to arrange for a tenant and not give possession to it for 2 months, that may be no big deal. Okay, so that's something to think about. Let's go back and share again. So may need that income to count that income to offset the payment. Like I said, do not forget about property taxes, home insurance, and HOA dues. Now, let me say a couple of other cons that you just need to think about when you think about this. Again, owning a rental property is not for everyone. All right. Yes, I get it. It's passive income down the road. It would be beautiful once you get it rented out and that house is paid for. You've just got that income coming in, and as long as you maintain the house and keep tenants in there and keep them generally happy, hey, great. It can be a wonderful cash cow. I get it. But some people just don't want to manage a property. They might consider property management. Property manager would take some cut of the rental income. It varies, but I would say it's traditionally between 10 and 12% of the rental income. They typically only get that while it's rented. So if it was vacant, you're not paying that. And they would take care of the maintenance and all those other sundries, getting a tenant, etc. There are different reasons that people do that, but some people want to do it themselves. Some people want to have a friend do it or a family member. That's really a lot of different decisions there. So something to consider. Let's see here. Just again, like I said, it's just one of these ideas that people love the idea of, and being able to kind of build in a retirement plan or whatever, however you want to see it. Some people I've seen do it and they go, hey, it's going to help out with college expenses when my kiddo goes off to college. Yeah, you could do that. That's something to consider. It just depends on what your goals are and your objective. But I do think it's important to always mention that just because a rental property isn't positive on its income stream doesn't make it a bad investment. That appreciation is a big deal and often is a big reason that people sometimes do this, not necessarily for the income stream. I want to take a little tangent here for just a minute, because sometimes I have people ask me, hey, what's a good property? Like, I think I want to get into rental property and I want to do a duplex or a triplex, because then or a quadplex. They will think, then I'll have multiple tenants and the odds of it being totally vacant for a month are pretty slim. And I would agree with that. That is generally true. There is a downside that has to be considered. And a lot of people I find don't really think about this. And so it's something I share with people. And let me say, I always tell a client, look, if you want to buy a duplex or a triplex, that is fine with me. I don't get paid any more or less what you do there. But generally speaking, let's say you bought a duplex or a triplex. It is totally true. The chances you would have all of those vacant at the same time is pretty slim. I would agree with that. So from an income position, that kind of makes sense. However, when it comes time that you want to sell it, you just need to be aware that duplex, triplex, quadplex is a much smaller segment of the market. Not everybody out there is looking for a duplex, triplex, quadplex. And generally, by the way, the ones that are other investors. And what are those investors looking for? A deal. So when it comes time to sell it, you may find it might not appreciate in exactly the same way as a single family home would. Okay? Because to contrast that, sometimes what people find is that the tenant of a duplex or triplex, in many cases, might just as easily rent an apartment. And so you have to think about who is the competition for what you're renting. Okay? If you own a triplex or duplex, and really those people would just as well rent an apartment, well, you got to realize that. I'm not saying it's a bad investment. You just got to think it through. By the way, sometimes the reason that they want the duplex or triplex, a lot of duplexes have the side yard. Why do they want that? Because they have a dog or a cat or some kind of animal. That's okay. Pet deposits can help, but you just got to know that. The single family. Here's the advantages of the single family property when it comes to owning a rental property. And again, like I said, I'll always help a client do whatever they want. But when you own a single family property, that's something that's often very difficult for a tenant to get in an apartment. Maybe it's a 2,000 square foot house. Well, there's not a lot of apartments that are that big and has a garage and a yard and all of that. So sometimes the single family is providing a product to the marketplace of potential tenants that would be very difficult to find elsewhere, okay, other than other single family homes. The other thing is, think about when you sell it. The time will probably come you would decide to liquidate, to sell that property. Well, the nice thing about the single family is, yes, you still have other investors that might want to buy it as a rental property, but you also pick up people that are first-time home buyers. Maybe they're single. Maybe they're a couple, no kids. Maybe they're a couple with kids. Maybe they're empty nesters. You name it. You dramatically increase your pool of potential buyers for a single family home because that's what the majority of the market is. So generally, certainly there are exceptions, but generally you will find single family homes tend to appreciate at a better clip than your duplex, triplex, quadplex type property. Something to think about. Again, every case has got its own unique positives and negatives. Hey, I am available for discussions with you about this more specific to your situation. You can use this QR code here to get my contact info. You'll also see in the emails that I send, if you want to set up a meeting, I'm happy to do that because this is a topic that really involves being very specific to one specific situation. But I hope these general terms help out. Let me know of any questions. Have a great day.